Thank you for attending tonight's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in front of the room. You may follow along by connecting to the district's website, wcsoh.org. You click on the district link, then select Board of Education, then Board Docs Agenda, and then select this evening's meeting. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first one being agenda item 6.01. The first set of public comments is relative to agenda items 7.01 through 11.04. Please state the agenda items you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is agenda item 12.01. There's a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. And with that, Mr. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd?
Here.
Ms. Connor?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mr. Velardo?
Here, and with that, would you stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 3.01, district highlights and recognitions. This is where we get to do some really fun stuff and recognize people in the district that go clearly above and beyond. So I am going to go to the podium. I'm going to ask the Board of Education and Dr. Kellogg to form a line in the front of this table, and I am going to read a resolution. This is a resolution recognizing an outstanding coach, but also an outstanding person. And Ron Balcone, would you please come up here? Stand next to me as I read this resolution recognizing you. With the last name Velardo, I can pronounce Balcone. Right?
Yes, you can.
Resolution for endorsement for Ron Balcone Strength Room. Whereas from 1975 to 1995, the Westerville North High School boys football team, led by Coach Ron Balcone, compiled an overall record of 160 wins, 56 losses, and 1 tie, with 6 Ohio Capital Conference titles and 4 state playoff appearances. And whereas during 6 different seasons, Coach Ron Balcone was named the Central District Coach of the Year, and in 1980 coached the Ohio All-Star team comprised of the top players in the state. And whereas in 2008, Coach Balcone contributed to the weight room renovations in our old weight room space, what will now be our school's circuit room. Therefore, be it resolved that the Westerville City Schools Board of Education and Superintendent recognize Ron Balcone's legacy of excellence by proclaiming that the weight room at Westerville North High School be known as the Balcone Strength Room. Everyone, Ron Balcone. This. I've asked Ron if he'd like to say a few words.
I promise I won't be long, but I did want to share with you and thank some very important people that made this possible. First off, Mr. Whitaker, Lee Whitaker, who was the principal, who gave me my first opportunity. I probably was somewhat of a risk, but he took it. And he started the school off and got things rolling, and he had the support of Mr. McCann and a couple other guys, John Justice and some guys like this. And Ron Jones and Jack Moore. And Mr. McCann was like an inspiration to everybody as well throughout. Lee drove us and pushed us and gave us all the support. Mr. McCann was there, and he was driving us the same way. And everybody wanted to do things for the school. It wasn't football or basketball or debate team. It was just Westerville North. And that's what made it special. So I just want to take this opportunity and thank all the wonderful athletes that I had a chance to coach over the years. And they were some wonderful kids. The support of the school was immense. It was terrific. I noticed that it wasn't, the band, they were fantastic. We used to have our meals with the band. So we'd go band, football player, so that they'd know each other's names and have an appreciation for what they did, whether they played the tuba or whether you played guard on the football team. They saw each other in the hallways and they communicated. So it was a great band. There was a couple hundred people. I used to tell our kids, I said, you see those 10,000 or 12,000 people in the stands and you think they're all supporting you? I said, let me tell you something. The band has another 100 more members than we do. So think about it. So that was the kind of support we had, and I want to thank all the teachers for their support and the kids, especially in the early years, for what they did, and all the people that were involved to make the program great. I had a fantastic coaching staff, and everything really, really came together. It was a lot of fun. We were all very eager, and I want to thank my beautiful babies, my twins. They're not babies anymore. They're 34, but almost, you know how that is. But I just want to thank you all for your time and sure appreciate this honor, and I'll accept it on behalf of the school and the coaches and a lot of people that supported us throughout the way. Thank you, Wes, and you guys take care. Thanks again.
Ron, why don't you come on over? Wes would like to offer a few words as well. Go ahead right into the microphone.
I don't want to extend things too much for everybody. Congratulations. We just want to, I apologize for my tardiness. I was dropping my daughter off at soccer camp, and she didn't want me to leave. So we want to just express our congratulations on this honor to Ron. Very definitely something that is very deserving. I've only been at Westerville North and Westerville City Schools for 1 year, but from the outset of me getting hired a year ago, I heard about Coach Balcone and what people were calling the glory days. So we are very, very excited for what we have now at Westerville North, but we are definitely wanting to look back and honor everything that's been accomplished in our school's past. And this isn't just an award or an honor for Ron Balcone. It's for all the guys who played for Coach Balcone, for all the fans who came and packed the stadium during his tenure as our coach. So we are very, very thankful for the 20 years, which is pretty impressive, that he put in, and obviously his accolades and his records speak for themselves. But again, just thank you to the board for allowing this to happen, and we're excited on Friday to officially dedicate this space to be called the Balcone Strength Room. So thank you again very much.
May I thank you, Ron. Thank you, Mr. McCann. Thank you, Wes, for coming. And as Wes mentioned, it is Friday. They're going to have an open house. This is an incredible weight room. I need to go there a little bit, as you can tell. Thank you. Anyway, so weight room on noon on Friday, right? An open house, and you all are welcome. And Wes said that we'll have cake, so I'll be there. It's cake. I'd like to have a motion to make this an official resolution. Could I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
You've got all of us, yeah.
And a second? Second. Mr. Griffith, please call the roll.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4.01, approval of the minutes for meetings held May 22 and May 30 of 2017. We just ask if there are any questions or corrections on these. We don't go through a formal approval process. Hearing none, moving on to agenda item 5, reports. 5.01, an update on the teaching and learning roadmap. Who is going to share that with us? Awesome. Come forward. All three of you?
We have the mighty team of Jen, and Greg here this evening. Before they begin, let me just preface it just by thanking them and so many other people in the district who've been so integral in terms of moving us forward in this particular endeavor. You may recall during my first year, we began engaging in a discussion about teaching and learning roadmap and building out that roadmap. And for the last 3 years, we've been slowly and quietly grinding out and implementing it and have made tremendous progress as a district. This might be one of those ones that we just kind of have continued to make progress on. We're actually in the process of now doing a refresh of this that they'll probably touch on. But this is one of the more successful things we've done, one of the things we're proudest of, and I thank them for their leadership on this, the direction they're taking us, and for all the teachers and the staff that have endured the changes and are making it work. I think we're about to turn a big corner in this area. So thank you to them, and I'll turn it over to them.
Okay. Greg has said that this is working properly, so we will begin. We did a similar presentation in November when we presented to OSBA, so some of you may have seen that then. And we started with this slide purposefully, and you will see that we have a road construction theme throughout, very memorable. But as all initiatives start and continue, we know that it's with sunny skies and a straight and very well-paved road, right? Every initiative that you roll out looks just like this. So that's why we wanted to start with this slide. Yeah. We began as directed by the Board of Education in 2013, when Dr. Kellogg joined our district, with creating a strategic plan, which was centered around the 21st century student. There were several key themes specific to instruction, and the final three you can see are also focused on technology, that it is an essential tool for our students, that we as a district need the infrastructure to support it, and that our students have equity of access. The top two that we'll talk about a little later talks about the changing of the teaching practices to be student-centered.
So construction begins. It's a big journey. It's a very, very long, winding road, but construction began with lots of optimism, and we continue with lots of optimism. But classroom technology and student access to technology were identified as key areas of interest. And so we defined and developed the vision and mission for 21st century learning and teaching. And it was determined that technology would be purchased that would support district goals and the mission for learning and teaching, and that we would work on planning how students would learn in the district. So we had a team, the Learning and Teaching Roadmap Committee, and this team was of over 80 staff members, and they met 4 times over the course of 5 months. And during this time, they developed the mission, and then this provided the context and the driving concepts for our learning and teaching roadmap, as well as the quantity of technology that we would be purchasing in these subsequent years that we are fully implemented now. And a critical concept, very important, was that we were not purchasing technology just for technology's sake. We were purchasing it for the purpose of student-centered learning. The mission statement that the team came up with was Westerville City Schools and its partners provide a 21st century education that aligns standards, assessments, curriculum, instruction, professional development, and learning environments to support student success. Students are empowered through innovative, relevant, and rigorous experiences to prepare them for career readiness in a dynamic global economy.
The elements of work that we did for the vision, if you take a look at this real closely, was that everything was centered around student-centered. And if you take a look at the silos, we had 7 silos that we did the work in. Everything about the plan focused back to the center, which was the what and how the students will learn. So if you take a look at the silos, we worked on facilities, which are the instructional spaces designed for student-centered learning, professional development, which does our facilities have the technology literacy skills to facilitate and direct these student activities? We have policies and processes, and that contained how does the organization structure reflect the change within the field of education. Tech support, how does the vision affect the technical support structure, policies, and initiatives? Systems and loose equipment, which were the basis for selecting teacher and student devices, and how do these devices best support student learning? Infrastructure, how do we have the power, the bandwidth, and cabling to support the learning environment? So all of these silos are meant to support learning and teaching for the 21st century student.
As Jen Fry stated earlier, the mission statement, kind of a lot of words, one very long sentence, which is sometimes what mission statements are. So we wanted to turn this into actionable questions for our teachers so that when we talk about a 21st century learning environment, they can ask themselves these 5 things. So we had a mnemonic, the LEARN rubric, so that teachers could ask, to what degree is my lesson centered on the needs of the learner? Does it engage my learners? To what degree have I aligned available resources? Is it rigorous? And do I provide this in a nurturing and caring environment? We started off strong with this, I really feel like we did, with our pilot teachers and even our first kind of phase, as we'll articulate. And we had teachers who were cross-referencing this with the OTES rubric because we were in our very early stages of the OTES rubric at the time. We were still piloting it in very small components. I think we had asked, 5 teachers per building that particular year, and one was doing that and the roadmap, so it was kind of a lot. And Beth O'Reilly specifically really worked to articulate how the two went together. I will say, as we've reflected over the past week with the team, as Dr. Kellogg mentioned, this one didn't necessarily stick as we had hoped. So we had a lot of dialogue around, do we need to revamp this? Now that OTES is in place, do we have that be, kind of the lead and the support it in some way? We think it's very valuable, but it just, upon reflection, hasn't stuck with our faculty as we had initially hoped when the roadmap team first met 4 years ago.
So in working with the team, factors for success were identified. There were high-level impact factors, medium-level impact, and low-level impact. And under high-level impact, sharing of the plan was deemed as critically important. Information technology upgrades, so in Greg's work, making sure that the infrastructure was ready for us to be able to even launch these devices in the district. Equity of access, making sure that students had access to devices, and professional development were all identified as high-level impact strategies. High-level impact meaning that these were the most critical things, that if things fell down in these areas, that the plan would be less likely to succeed. Our medium-level impact strategies were having a common mission, data-driven student learning, and having a power user demonstration and pilot project, which we did. And then low-level impact strategies were developing a software and hardware adoption process, modeling in alternative instructional environments, and student technology literacy.
In order for this to be a smooth start for the district, one of the things that we were very fortunate was we were able to partner with the city and actually purchase a couple of strands of fiber that would allow us to actually get very quick bandwidth to 11 of our sites. This summer, we're actually going to be adding 2 more sites, which are Central and Alcott, to this fiber ring, so we're very excited about adding 2 more, which eliminates our AT&T bill. One of the things we're also able to do to make this successful was we increased bandwidth between the buildings with AT&T. We built our own fiber network early in this that allowed us to connect South, Blendon, Whittier, transportation to this network. We were also able to upgrade core switches and installed wireless in every classroom before we actually were able to deploy the Chromebook deployment at the 2-to-1. So we had a very nice smooth start to the start of this. So we're actually in phase 2 right now of this, upgrading this. So.
When we began, it was very, very important that we start small. So we had 6 teams of teachers so let me back up. We had over 90 applicants to be power users that would start in the fall. And I remember, keep the number small, keep the number small. And I went to Dr. Kellogg and I said, okay, we've got 25. He goes, less than 20. And I said, 25. And he said, less than 20. So I left and I came back and I said, 18. He said, that's less than 20. So that's how we ended up with 18. But it was so critical. We have Jen Fry and her department, 3 ed tech coaches, and we wanted to be able to provide them with the training, with the professional development, with the support needed, which is why we wanted to keep it so small. Another very important piece is that we encouraged people to apply as teams. This is, instructional change, this big shift can't happen in a silo, as Greg had referenced earlier. We wanted people to be able to go next door to someone else who taught social studies or another person who taught 3rd grade and said, how did it go for you today? Let's talk about this. What worked well? What didn't? So in fact, one of our teams at the high school, they had all applied separately. We said, okay, guys, if you're going to do this, you're going to need to be a team. And that was at North. We had one at Genoa, and I'm going to forget one. So Annahurst, Wilder, Mark Twain, and of course you always forget one. Hawthorne. Thank you. 4th grade at Hawthorne. Yes, I was just in Anne's room today. Yes. So this group of teachers, they did get a small stipend for their work. They met every month after school, participated in book studies, and were really our driving force. So that is how we got started. Very small, only 18 teachers in the beginning.
So all roads have bumps, right? Mm-hmm. All roads have bumps, sometimes potholes. Mm-hmm. Some of our bumps along the way have been the sharing of the roadmap. So Dr. Kellogg went diligently building to building to building, had a staff chat with every single staff, and I think everyone heard the message, but as learning theories tell us, people don't always hear a message until they've maybe heard it 5 to 7 times, and it really applies and is relevant to them. So although they may have heard about the learning and teaching roadmap, I would say there was varying degrees of understanding as to what the learning and teaching roadmap was, or that there was a learning and teaching roadmap. So along the way, we started to roll out devices after our power user project, and the Chromebooks were selected as our device. And as we started to roll them out, sometimes we would have people say, well, when do I get my devices? Or how come I got these devices? So they didn't exactly know why or how they were selected, because we went from the power user phase, we went to the buildings, being able to select their groups of teachers that would come on board, again, working in teams. So we had varying levels of messaging and understanding, but we've worked through that. We kind of had to loop back around, message with our district leadership, help to get that message to the teachers. The ed tech team worked really hard to continue with that messaging as well.
And that's very similar. So it did get turned over to the buildings. That was the goal, is that the buildings decided how the devices would be rolled out and to what teachers. Some picked all of science, some picked, 4th grade. So, part of that equity of access is it wasn't something that was district-wide all at the same time, which led to some confusion. At the same time, we had the new tests being implemented, and we knew that those were going to be online. So several of our elementaries chose to go heavy 3, 4, 5, knowing that that transition was coming. We also started a lot of digital pilots. We continue to rethink what is traditionally called winter intervention. It used to be something outside of school, and that has evolved over time. So we had Dreambox and 10 Marks and Lexia, which are all digital content products that we were trying. Those came with devices. We also received a grant. We were phase 2 of Straight A and received an EdSite grant, which was another 1,268 devices, I believe. So we have the influx of those. So it was a lot to balance. I will say, and this is something that I think is great about the roadmap, is that the district had stated we are going 2 to 1, and our teachers have seen it happen. They have the devices in their hands now. Some didn't want to wait as long as they did, but we made true to our promise, and I think that that is one of the most invaluable things here, is that teachers, we said that this was going to happen, and here it is, and they've got it. So I think that's great.
And as we rolled out these devices, we found very quickly that internet access was pretty premium for these to work successfully. Chromebooks are very heavy in cloud-based computing. So one of the things we learned very quickly was we need more bandwidth. So just last year, we increased our bandwidth from 1 gig to 2 gig, and we're actually going to be increasing it this summer to 5 gig. So as we found out very quickly, we can't get enough bandwidth in front of these devices for them to do some of the online stuff. One of the things we did when we rolled this out, the nice thing was that we rolled this out into phases. So we rolled this out in 4 different phases, and we're actually over 10,000 Chromebooks at this point in time for the district. And our initial initiative was a 2 to 1, so we've exceeded that with the EdSite grants at this point. So that kind of goes to show you what the bandwidth that we needed is why we needed to go to where we're at today. But we're over 10,000 for the student devices alone at this point.
So professional development is a winding road, and it's ever ongoing. As we continue to change the hearts and minds of our teachers, and bring everyone along on this journey. It's been pretty amazing. We've had a lot of successes. Some of the professional development opportunities that we've offered have been holding Ed Tech Camp the last 3 years, where we've had 2 days of professional learning led by our teachers, our Ed Tech coaches and our teachers, with good attendance of 150 teachers. This year we had 30 substitutes attend as well, which was a really good opportunity for them. It was a little bit of a learning curve for us on the tech end because we weren't quite prepared for their level of expertise, but we adapted, and it was actually, they all, for the most part, gave us really good feedback that they appreciated the opportunity, and now those substitutes can go into our building a little more skilled and with a little more understanding. Westerville Educator Day, we continue to offer tech integration opportunities. We have 3 tech integration coaches, and we've also used ITSCO, which is a local technology consortium, for the last 3 years. In the beginning, we had the coaches working in all grade levels. We found out after the first 2 years that our secondary teachers weren't really embracing that coaching model, and so we moved it just to the elementary this past year, and then we'll be evaluating whether that's a model that we need to continue with, or whether our ed tech coaches and the capacity that we've built in the district will be enough for us to continue our momentum. We also have a tech liaison at every building, and the tech liaison is a teacher who has a supplemental contract, and in past years, they focused on break-fix kind of things, just the little things to help keep the buildings going, and in the past few years, we've worked to help develop their skills in being able to offer professional development to their staff as well, and we've even taken that to a level being very specific and giving them some very core expectations for next year, which we've been working to refine that position as we go along. So our teachers are continuing to grow, continuing to evolve, and we wanted to take a measurement of how they were feeling about their effectiveness in integrating technology into the curriculum. And so in the beginning of this school year, we gave this survey to each one of the teachers, and they were asked to self-rate. for the purpose of understanding, giving us some feedback, and helping us to be able to grow them and continue to provide opportunities that would help to grow them. Our baseline data in September was 52% of our teachers rated themselves in the top 2 tiers, which is impact and innovation. We set a district goal of getting to 60%, and then we did this survey again just in the last few weeks in May, and we had great growth. Our teachers now self-identified themselves as 66.5% of them putting themselves in the top 2 tiers, so that was good. That was exceeding our growth target because that was a 14.5 growth on that. Some of the strategies that they identified that they believe got them there, we asked them, what strategies helped you if you grew? What helped you get there? And it was quite a number of things. It was working with ed tech coaches. It was working with the ITSCO coaches. It was the project plans, PD plans that our ed tech coaches develop with the buildings. It was a focus on SAMR model, which is a model of technology integration that takes builds an understanding with teachers about what a basic level of tech integration looks like, and then how you can evolve that to become, to redefine education, basically, through tech integration. We've done a lot with maker spaces. We did a principal cohort, or secondary leadership cohort, of leadership and blended learning through the ESC, and that was 5 full days of professional development where our secondary principals developed a roadmap that aligned to the district roadmap, and then took that back to their teachers, focused on blended learning. Those were some of the things, and some of the things that I really liked that they said was they worked with each other, and that they just dug in. They had devices, and they dug in, and they just decided to learn it themselves. And I think that shows a lot of growth that on our teachers' part, that they're ready, they're willing, they want to, and they're willing to do what it takes and not just wait for us to give them PD on whatever topic.
So along the journey, some of the things that we continue to work on, the first is the software-hardware adoption process. In large part, this was folded into the curriculum and materials adoption process. So as we're writing new courses and selecting materials, the digital content piece is right there in the forefront. The digital content committee that is made up of equal number of WEA members and administrators have also developed this spring a process in which if someone is wanting to try something, either with hardware or software, that they complete, it's a survey, a questionnaire, just to get feedback to see in what ways we could support this. So that is something that we have developed and will be rolling out at the beginning of next year. And we've talked a little bit about it at the roadmap meetings last week as well. When it comes to modeling instructional spaces, we have piloted some tech solutions that are flexible, including flat screen TVs on mobile carts. As we talked about when we had a facilities conversation several weeks ago, this wasn't something where specific funds were put from the roadmap to be able to do this on a large scale, but we have piloted small pieces throughout the district. Student technology literacy, over the course of the year, elementary teachers got together and built tech integration guidelines, expectations for students, which are extremely helpful and easily digestible. Over the course of the next year, we hope to expand that to 612. It also folds in with our library media specialist curriculum, as that embeds student tech literacy as well. So all of the teachers have, we had representation from all of our elementary buildings, and they have been communicating that with their buildings as well. So that is something that they are informed of. And it's just very helpful to say, okay, as a kindergarten teacher, what should my kids be able to do? And as a first grade teacher, saying what should they come in knowing has been very much needed, and they have been very appreciative of that. Also with home internet and device access, we have sent home devices on a very, very limited scale. We're still kind of working through that because we can't give one to everyone to go home. But we've done that a little bit at the AEC, and when we've run into a few specific situations, particularly around College Credit Plus, and some of the courses are needing that device in order to complete it because the content is on it. And so we've worked through that as well. And we continue to look at that, especially the home internet piece. We've looked at a couple different options to make this more accessible to those that don't have that in their homes.
Building the highways and the byways. So we said that teaching practices need to be student-centered, flexible, and reflect 21st century skills, including technology as a learning tool, and that instructional staff should use research-based, student-centered instructional practices that promote the development of 21st century skills. So we now have much greater access to technology tools. This is allowing us to grow our practice, allowing us to realize the potential of how technology tools can affect our instruction and affect our students. And our teachers are now better able to customize. And that's kind of where the journey is taking us now, is how do we personalize instruction for students if we have these tools available to us that can help us to get there. So I think I see that as the next phase of the journey, is really helping people to understand what that can look like and how we can do that with the tools that we have available. Our elementary students now have access to digital products that are adaptive. That really helps get them into a more personalized space. Lexia is an adaptive reading tool. Dreambox is an adaptive math tool. The ability to personalize instruction and have the teacher to be the expert who then looks at the data and makes instructional decisions and works with the student as well to help understand the data are kind of the next steps in that journey forward. Makerspaces are something that we have developed in most of our buildings throughout the district. Part of student-centered learning, we've been talking about design thinking and the design process and engaging students. On the left, you'll see the Hanby staff. They had a professional learning activity before school started to launch their makerspace, where we did a design challenge, and they had hands-on time with the tools that are in their makerspace. At the top, that is Central High School's Library Media Center has developed a audio-video studio where students can record projects. So that's their green screen that you see behind them. At the bottom, Hawthorne Elementary, one of our teachers who will be the assistant principal of Genoa Middle School, took a stage that was nothing but storage, just old SRA kits, boxes, you name it, and it was back there from since Hawthorne Elementary had probably opened. Cleaned that all out, took the shelving, and developed those into individual workstations. And if you ever get a chance to go to the back of the stage, those are all individually themed. So there's a Rosie the Riveter, there's like a Superman, there's one that the principal designed herself. They're all individualized. They're really neat, and those are where the kids can work, as well as table space. We also have, that's the Handy staff, again, doing a design challenge. That's back to school day, fourth Friday, where we had a makerspace set up. And this is our Hawthorne Hackers Club, which is an after-school club of students that work as a team to learn coding skills. So as we talked about, we've been revisiting the roadmap this last week for 2 days, and we'll be working with that committee again in August to continue to work on it. We are working together to develop what the next steps look like and to re-identify what are our priorities. What are high priorities for us now? What are medium-level priorities for us now? What are low-level priorities? And what are our next steps to continue to move forward? That's what we're working on. Questions? That's what we're working on. That's all.
Wonderful.
Just that. I mean, not much. We're not busy at all.
Wonderful. That's your side jobs, right? That's, thank you. That's wonderful. I'm sure there are some comments, questions that the board would like to share.
Who wants to say something?
I was just going to say thank you. That's it. Are we to the point where we have, what kind of ratio do we have for students to devices at this point?
Currently, we're around 14,500 kids, and we're at 10,000 devices. Is
Okay.
where we're at right now.
So interestingly, if you're a teacher who doesn't have consistent access, they still feel the pressure. And there will be teachers that come up to me or say, gosh, I still don't have access. I still don't have access. And we still have pockets of teachers, just because of logistics of how the carts are set up, don't always have access to devices, and so they still struggle. But we have one cart per 2 classrooms, basically, and then however the principals can make it work. There is great access. There's still some pain points for people who don't feel that they have access all the time. And that just comes with logistics. The cart's here, the kids are here, the kids are in study hall, but the carts are in the classrooms. Those kids in study hall don't have access, so a lot of their work is now in Schoology, or their work is in an online product, so.
Okay. Do you think we'll ever get to the point where we do have 1-to-1 ratio, or is that part of the goal, or that's what I'm trying to figure out?
It wasn't identified in the first roadmap. I think that would be very dependent on what the community wants.
Okay, thank you.
There's a budget piece to that one, so when
I understand that.
when we embarked on the initial roadmap, Glenn, who works with us on this, sat down with Greg and Bart and other people and looked at our budget numbers. So you think about how much do we invest in technology and refresh, right? Because X amount of years, you got to redo the desktop. So a lot of the rough cut to the budgeting was built around, which then drove back, okay, what's the potential for us with this budget? What's the potential of our ratio? And that's where the 2-to-1 came from. And then we had some good fortune with some grants that accelerated our purchase. So we've outpaced the ratio that the budget was based on. Moving forward, I think part of this process will be able to reevaluate evaluate how we've done with that budget to get where we're at, whether or not it maintains us, sustains us moving forward, and whether or not we can capture opportunity to grow ourselves to that ratio. My own personal preference would be see a lot stronger 1-to-1 with devices less about to the teacher in the classroom, but to the kids over time. So here's your device. You keep this with you like your textbook or your pencils we give you. And I think that's going to be part of the discussion in this current version.
Thanks. I think that you guys have done a lot of work, so I really appreciate it. I think it's a really good and important piece for our students, so thank you.
If you think about it, this has been a very short period of time, and a massive amount has been accomplished thus far. Yeah, there are always some bumps in the road here and there, but much of the road has been very, very well paved, and I want to congratulate you for that work. I like the model. I think that the model has proven itself. The very tight connection, in fact, the leadership by the instructional components is key in my mind to the success that we've seen so far, and I would imagine we'll continue with that sort of model. There's no point focusing on the technology without focusing more predominantly on the instruction and also on the human aspect of the integration and the implementation. So we've done a whole lot, and budget notwithstanding, we're going to do a lot more.
Just to add what everybody said, I would also thank you specifically for the inclusion of substitute teachers. I think the reality that all of us are facing these days is that there's not an opportunity for a lost moment of instruction, where where most of the community of folks that are my age or so remember our experience with substitute teachers and what that meant in the classroom. That's no longer a viable option. It's no longer an opportunity for us to lose a single moment of instruction. So I appreciate that. I hope that we expand on that and create other opportunities for folks that are filling in interim positions to be able to be up to speed on technology so that they're a direct value contributor to our students.
really a lot of applause and encouragement. I've never heard Dr. Nestor Baker say before, the budget notwithstanding. I've never heard you use that phrase, and that's an awesome thing to say at this point, because I really would love to see us even push even further. Although I really, you just look back, this has not been going on that long. And that's a whale of a road that you all have created and gone down and so on. It's just wonderful. I want to just touch on, I want to affirm one thing. I think Jen on the left, I think you might have said, is that we stuck to our word about getting, middle Jen, sorry. We stuck to our word about getting these devices out. I want to affirm that really strongly, because when we say we want to do something and then follow through, I mean, you're just building up credibility, and that's just. And so the next time, okay, we're going to bring more devices out, and we want to talk about creative instructional spaces. Well, yeah, sure, they're saying that. No, we're really focusing in that area, and that matters. And we are creative instructional spaces. Budget notwithstanding, we're just going to be looking at all of this, and so I would love to just have 7 or 8 questions to shoot at you, but you all, this is really good and thorough. And I think Richard is right, that you can't waste instructional time. And this, I applaud those substitute teachers for signing up. Mm-hmm. That's because they could say, well, you know, I don't know, really, that's awesome that they.
Also helps them towards their license renewal, so they appreciated it.
Yeah, what a blessing.
Our Human Resources Department for sending them our way. It was just started with a question. Hey, could we send subs to Ed Tech Camp? Well, that seems like a great idea. Yes.
Wow.
Let's do it.
What a blessing all around. Thank you. Any other, Dr. Kellogg, anything you'd add? Thank you. Thank you very much. A great report.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 5.02, we are going to have an all-day kindergarten update. Barb Wallace is going to be sharing that? Great, thank you.
Good evening, President Villardo, Dr. Kellogg, excuse me, Mr. Griffith, and members of the board. Let's see if this is working. No, it doesn't seem to be.
Turn it off and turn it back on. That's the first thing that turn it off.
Doesn't matter, it still comes down to the battery.
Yeah, it could be the battery. So,
Teacher on special assignment. A lot of words. That's what they do. Okay. Yeah, they do. There are only 3 of them. Yeah, they. If not, we can just talk. Okay. In the fall of 2015, after listening to members of our community who advocated for all-day kindergarten and surveying our parents, we began offering a fee-based all-day kindergarten program as an option to our traditional half-day kindergarten program. The students were selected for the program through a random lottery process, much like the process we use for magnet school participants. Our half-day program continues to meet state standards and adequately prepare our students for first grade. The curriculum in our half-day and all-day programs is identical. Our all-day kindergarten program was initiated to provide our families with an additional choice that allows students to have more time to practice their academic skills and to practice their social skills through play. In 2015, we offered all-day programming for 266 kindergarten students. We reopened Longfellow with 4 classes and 1 class each at Elcott, Amherst, Charrington, Hawthorne, Robert Frost, and Whittier. The students were selected through a random lottery process. We learned during our first year that Longfellow facility presented some unique challenges. Consequently, we've installed sound-reducing ceiling panels, reduced class size because of the very small classrooms, hired 2 instructional aides to assist with bathrooms, lunch and recess, and general supervision. These changes have greatly improved our experience for the students at Longfellow. Next. In 2016, with your support, we were able to extend our all-day kindergarten program to 444 students by adding 8 additional classrooms. Longfellow continues to serve 4 classes. Elcott and Pointview each have 2 all-day K kindergarten programs, and every other homeschool building hosts 1 all-day kindergarten classroom. Both years, we have had over 600 applications for our all-day programs. While we are not able to serve all of the families who indicate an interest in all-day kindergarten programs, we have, however, maximized our ability to offer all-day kindergarten with our current facilities. Without additional classroom space, our all-day kindergarten program has reached capacity. Next. This slide on gender breakdown I put before you because there have been questions in the past about gender balance and whether or not we need to put a cap on students based on gender. Here's the current status for next year, but remember Longfellow and Pointview are included but still not full. At this point in time, the all-day kindergarten programs are more closely balanced by gender than our half-day programs. This page breaks down our tuition assistance. We have 76 students paying no fees, 42 families paying $40 a month fees, 26 families paying $150, and 243 families paying the full fee of $300. Here we have the number of free and reduced lunch students in the all-day K kindergarten programs, and then in the building total is the second column right next to it. This is based on a report from Power School that we pulled in June, and the numbers are lower than we would expect to see in the fall, but it takes a while to get all of the applications gathered and approved. At this point, the free and reduced in the kindergarten program is 30%. Last year, it came out about 36 by the time we were finished. I expect that by the time we fill Pointview and Longfellow, it will mirror past years. Our revenue and expenses. The first year, we collected $394,800. This was when we only had 266 students. Last year, as you can see, we collected over $711. And we project this year to collect over $784,000. Our kindergarten programs will continue to serve our students with both half-day and all-day kindergarten options. The number of classrooms serving all-day and half-day will remain as it stands. The program is now established. There will be no additional costs associated with our all-day K program. Without any anticipated changes to all-day K programming or finances, we would recommend transitioning from semi-annual reports to the board to as-needed reports based on the student superintendent's recommendations. We anticipate that we'll need at least 5 years of longitudinal data before we can complete a sound academic comparison between our full-day and half-day programs. We will continue to monitor and track our programs and make small changes as necessary. Thank you. Questions?
Any questions, comments? Yes, Jerry.
I had a question. Have you seen, I know it's a random selection process or a lottery, but have you seen any trend as far as any changes in the socioeconomic makeup of who's being served, or?
This is only going into our third year, but they look very similar for second and third year. And they seem to mirror the buildings that they are in.
Okay, so you think that the ones that are receiving free and reduced lunch is about the same % from year to year?
Mhm. Yes.
Thank you.
I admit, I cheated. I had a meeting with Barb about this earlier so that I could really dig into the discussion with her. I'm not going to reiterate questions that I've already talked about with you. You covered several things that I had asked in the presentation. But as I said with the technology roadmap, this is another piece that we have moved quickly to bring up to capacity.
Very quickly.
And, yes, there were bumps in that road too, here and there. I'm pleased with what we did to make sense of Longfellow. It was not initially designed as an all-K building, and going into that, we needed to make those changes to make it successful, and it's on a good trajectory. All of the other buildings, I think, are where we need them to be. It's important, as we look at the data, that we do see it mirroring what the building is as a whole. We do still have some seats, right, at Point View?
At Point View and Longfellow.
So some of those people who cannot be served at their home school, if they should desire to do so, they could go to those buildings.
Yes, we were in the process of calling back and saying you didn't get your first choice. Would you like to go to Longfellow or Point View? This takes much longer than you would think it would take by the time you send out letters, give the parents a week to respond, and then call because they didn't respond. So it is a lengthy process. This also enables people who didn't live in our district when we had the lottery, if they move in and they're interested, they now have 2 options that they can do for all-day kindergarten. So it actually works out very nicely.
Yeah, it does, and I appreciate the amount of time that you spend with the families in helping them to make those choices. So we're doing well. I know you're probably feeling, as I do, somewhat impatient to get to those out years so that we can identify whether there are differences. It'll be difficult, though, to parse out some of the variables that would lead to some differences. A number of families that I've spoken to want to maintain half-day because of the enrichment that they can provide for their child during the rest of the day. Other families believe very strongly in all-day. So even though we are at capacity, and that brings its own set of problems, the silver lining on that is we are actually meeting both types of family needs in offering both half-day and all-day at this point in time. Great job, Barb, and thank you to all of the staff who work in this program.
I'm just wondering a little bit about teacher feedback from the first year to the second year. What have you heard?
Much less feedback this year of all. Things seem to be running very smoothly. We do have a couple of places where, because buildings typically run with a lower ratio, when we do the all-day K kindergarten and put 26 in, the teachers aren't used to it. At buildings where the classes have been more full all along, it doesn't appear to be an issue. So I think that's still a little learning curve as they get used to a larger class.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for all of this information and keeping us always in the loop.
When I joined the board, this was one of the very first topics that I was able to get involved with, and I want to thank you. I was very, very specific about the needs for these reports. We're still in the same situation that we were when we had this conversation initially as an idea, what we were going to do as a district, which is we have an unfunded mandate we have no unfunded mandate, rather, relative to all-day kindergarten, no state mandate for all-day kindergarten in general. We have community interest and desire. We were able to fulfill that. I think that we were also able to answer the question around economic parity. And when I look at these numbers and I look at these percentages, I think that we answered that in a very positive way. And I know that we made changes from first year to second year because, again, we learned. But the big piece was that we had an accountability to our community and to our taxpayers to show them that we were managing this expansion of programming in a fiscally responsible way. And again, I think that we've done that. I'm going to be very frank. I feel like we've gone above and beyond as it relates to that fiscal transparency. I think that this is a net win for the district. I would be strongly in favor of us moving towards ad hoc reporting or at the superintendent's desire, because, like Dr. Nesterbaker, my interest is now much more on the longitudinal data and what that means for our students in our district, as opposed to the running of the program itself. I mean, the last piece that I would leave off with is that there's just fundamentally a reality that we have to deal with within the district, which is that to expand this program, we're talking about capital expenditure, we're talking about building reconfigurations, we're talking about change that is significant and substantial and different than what it took us to get to this point. And that's something that I'm hoping is taken into account within the community. It would be nice to say it's the right thing to do, but the reality is that there is a cost associated with continued expansion, and I believe that we're right in the sweet spot of where we need to be based upon the resources that we have available to us.
Please pass along to really your whole team our appreciation for what you all have done in, I think Nancy is right, in pretty short order. And I'm one of those, wish we could expedite down the road 5, 6, 7 years and get some studies, but you can't, and that's okay. So thank you very much. Wonderful report.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 6.01, public comments related to action items. We have no one signed up this evening. Financial reports 7.01, we have none. Moving into the personnel consent agenda. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, President Velardo, members of the board. Tonight's consent agenda contains 12 sections involving 208 persons. Section 8.01 is the retirement of 2 classified administrators and 4 classified employees. 8.02 is the retirement of 1 teacher and 1 amended effective date for a previously approved retirement. 8.03 is the resignation of 8 classified employees and 2 substitutes. 8.04 is the resignation of 1 licensed administrator, 3 teachers, 1 intern, and 1 outside supplemental contract. 8.05 is a leave of absence for 1 classified employee. 8.06 is a leave of absence for 2 teachers. 8.07 is a change of assignment for 3 classified employees, 6 temporary changes of assignment, and 1 amended end date for a previously approved item. 8.08 is a change of assignment for 1 administrator and 4 teachers. 8.09 is a contractual status change for 8 classified employees. 8.10 is a variety of one-time payments for 54 teachers. 8.11 is the employment of 1 classified administrator, 4 classified employees, and 4 substitutes. And 8.12 is a variety of licensed employment items. And at this time, I believe Dr. Kellogg and Bart both would like to say a few words before you.
I'll go first. Mr. President, member of the board, just part of this retirement in here was Ellen Gilmore, who works in my office as a senior payroll officer. Just gave her a quick shout out. She's been in our office 20 years, stepped right into the payroll officers, senior officers, so kudos to her. She's been a valuable asset to this district. We have hired her replacement, which will be on the next board meeting. I should say replacement as far as payroll. We're moving one of our current into her position. But Ellen has done a great job for this district. She has a tremendous amount of knowledge of history of how things were being paid. She will be missed in this district.
I will have a series of administrative changes. I want to start with AJ because his blonde-haired boy back there has been awfully patient through all of this. So we would Todd, do you want to introduce your new assistant principal?
Yeah, this is AJ Hoffman. He comes to us from Big Walnut School District and administrative role up there. We're very excited to have him, see the work that he can do with our kids and families and teachers. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I look forward to it.
He's pretty good with a 2-year-old, so I think he should probably be pretty good with.
Thank you.
Happy to hear that. She was very worried. She's been texting the whole time.
We'll enroll them in all-day kindergarten, in the lottery today, so welcome. A couple other changes, Jeff LaRose's retirement you're acting on this evening, and we'll continue discussion about Jeff's role in the future. Kenny Nichols, who's retiring, we thank him for his service, just fabulous individual who's been out doing so many great things in our facility size. Buck Weaver, who is resigning and taking a different position, we thank him for his work, I think the last 3 years at South as AD. We're excited about Mike Hensey's opportunity as he moves from assistant principal at Westerville South to principal at Genoa Middle School. He returns to the middle school, and if you know Mike, I think he was built for middle school. And I think he could serve as my substitute if we ever need a stand-in for me. Scott Dorn, we welcome back, who's coming. Scott was with us as AD at South, went to Worthington, and we welcome him back, taking on the role of Executive Director for Operations. He'll learn from Jeff LaRose along the way. AJ, who's with us, and Kristen Millett. Is Kristen here this evening? Did Kristen make it?
No, she's unable.
She did not make it. So Kristen Miller will be coming to us as an assistant principal at Hawthorne. And if I remember correctly, Kristen's from Southwestern City Schools. I know that because I got an angry phone call from a friend of mine down there who's mad at me for stealing from down south. So we welcome her as well this evening. So a lot of moving around a little bit in the administrative world. We welcome those that are coming in, and we thank those that are leaving us for the service they've provided us.
I think we have one other person here that's on the, correct?
Ms. Strangers, you want to do the introduction?
Yes, yes. I just,
I'm thinking administrator, and I'm like, who did I miss?
No,
Oh my gosh, sorry.
no, just because you're here, we want to point you out and embarrass you. Rob, would you please?
Earl Ram called and asked if I'd step in, so I'm here. Jessica Strandis is going to be a new kindergarten teacher at Amherst Elementary, and I'm thrilled to have somebody else come and get me.
Jessica, thank you for coming tonight, and I apologize that my team made me embarrass you, but
Are you getting dinner out of this? I think there should be a celebratory dinner. I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works in your house, but in my house, yeah.
My wife already has asked.
I have a couple suggestions, expensive ones that I can make on your behalf. Welcome. We're glad to have you.
It's wonderful, the changes that are happening. It does make it a lot easier to bear the goodbyes that we have to say when we do have to say them. But I'm so excited, and, you know, I figure a little blonde-haired 2-year-old, that's a pretty good indicator of the success that AJ's going to have. That was the final test, right? So that was great. I would like to ask the board's indulgence and ask that 8.08 be called separately. My daughter is on that list. Bart, can we use the same motion in second, or you want a separate one?
As long as the board's okay, you can just call it that way, and we'll just do a motion a second just for hers.
okay, I'd like a motion and a second to set aside, is that what you're asking me,
I
sir?
think
Or
it's
just to vote on?
just to vote on all of them excluding 8 point.
Okay.
Oh, my gosh, if I were to have to call my daughter tonight and say the board voted to set aside the piece of the consent calendar that you were on, you and Mike Hinsey,
Which number?
8.08.
All right, could we call the roll for 8.01 through 8.12, excluding 8.08?
That's fine.
Would you call the roll on that?
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. Now, would you please call the roll separately on a motion and a second to vote on 8.08?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Abstain.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. Thank you very much, and I apologize for that. I knew that, and this time of year, there's a lot of moving parts. But, and we do, I think Nancy's right. We say goodbye to some really awesome, really good people. Thank you, Bart, for pointing that out from your office as well. But we're saying hello to some pretty awesome people as well. So, thank you. Moving on to Agenda Item 9, recommended action, old business. These are revised policy final readings. And while we will take them one at a time, 9.01, final reading, revised policy 2461, recording of district meetings involving students and/or parents. And again, I won't go into detail about any of these. These are final readings, and we've talked about them already at different meetings. So may I have a motion and a second on 9.01?
So moved?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. May I have a motion on 9.02, final reading, revised policy 563001, positive behavior intervention and supports and limited use of restraints and seclusions? A motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. 9.03, final reading, revised policy 8210, school calendar. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. Agenda item 9.04, final reading, policy 8305, information security. A motion and a second, please.
So moved?
Second.
And please call the roll.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. 9.05, final reading, policy 8310, public records. A motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. Agenda item 10, recommended action, new business 10.01, first readings now, revised policy 4215, use of tobacco by classified staff. Come on down.
Good evening, President Velardo, members of the board. I am here to talk about the first three policies up there on the first reading, 4215, 7434, and 9160. They are tobacco policies, and basically, I think that once upon a time, the language in here must have slipped through because the language really doesn't reflect our actual practice, and it hasn't reflected our practice in quite a while. There's verbiage in the policy that reads, except at designated times and in designated areas as defined in statute. We have 100% smoke-free environments, so we're just updating these three policies to reflect our actual practice. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. That was first reading for revised 4215, 7434, and 9160. Agenda item 10.04, first reading revised policy 2464, gifted education and identification.
Good
Mrs. Jarrell.
evening. Good evening, President Velardo, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Mr. Griffith. I assumed my position as a gifted coordinator 4 years ago, and one of the first things I heard was that we had operating standards from the state of Ohio, but they were about to change. 4 years later, they did. Actually, in the spring, late spring, they went ahead and ratified the new operating standards, approved them. And we have now until July 1st to go ahead and make our changes. The good news is that there are very little changes required for us in terms of our current policy versus the new policy. What they've done in the new policy primarily is to give more flexibility to our districts. There used to be a time amount that was specified to be considered for service. I believe it was 180 minutes in a setting before you could count it as service of one particular kind of service. And now they've adjusted that to say whatever your standard period is in a district, so that gives districts more flexibility there. In addition, they're starting a board a group at the state level of gifted parents and various educators across the state of Ohio to come together and discuss gifted needs and concerns and things that are going well and things that need to be changed. So that's going to be something that's new and different, but will potentially maybe impact us in that we might have some people participating, but doesn't require us to really change our policy. They have some new, very specific language in the operating standards that talk about the equity access. It's always been our practice, so it doesn't require us to change anything, but there's some very specific language included in there now regarding what should happen for kids of all socioeconomic and ethnic groups, and students that are also twice exceptional. They also have very specific language regarding who should be working on a written education plan, which is also something we've always done, and it's been a part of our policy, but now it's specified in the new operating standards. And the biggest change, and the one that probably will impact us the most, is they've really ramped up the expectations for professional development for teachers that provide service for gifted students. And they put some very rigorous, is a good word, numbers to that. Starting July 1st, teachers that provide service for students in a classroom setting have to have at least 30 hours the first year of professional development, 30 the second year, and then after that, it's up to us to go ahead and continue to provide that. We've always provided professional development to our teachers. It's been ongoing, not quite to that level. And so we've been working really hard to make some adjustments to make sure that we can make sure that all of our teachers have the professional, professional development that they are required to have and that they need to have. We are sending 47 teachers this summer to ESCO institutes and Otterbein institutes where they're able to get their full 30 hours in one classroom setting. And we also have plans for embedded professional development, lunch and learns, book studies. We have, I want to say, as of last week, 40 hours of Schoology coursework that we have online that teachers can access directly. So we've been working very hard in the last couple of months to make sure that we have what they need. When it comes to the actual changes in our bylaws and policies, you'll see that there are very few changes in here. I will have to point out one statement that was added. Unfortunately, it should have been added before, but it was added after you received this. It's on the second page under G when it talks about the opportunities for assessment for students. The statement that was added is once a student is identified in an area, they will not be individually tested in that area. That came up as a part of discussion this year with a particular parent who wanted their child tested again, even though they were already identified, because they were interested in getting a higher score. And when I talked to the Department of Ed, they said, no, the understanding is that you identify. And once they're identified, your obligation for identification is met. But it seemed like a good idea to make that very clear. So that's more of a point of clarification. You'll see that the majority of the other changes typically have to do with, again, clarifications as far as our policy versus the new policy. They've outlined the fact that gifted services typically occur during an instructional day, which is always the case, but now they include information regarding higher education coursework and mentorships that can also be counted as service, which often happen outside the school day. And they also, just wording-wise, they spell out College Credit Plus, they spell out advanced placement, they added international baccalaureate courses, and they also added services from a trained arts instructor, pardon me. And the other thing I talked about was for the written education plans, they should be developed in collaboration with an educator who holds licensure and endorsement in gifted ed. This has always been our practice. Our gifted facilitators at the elementary level and middle school level work directly with the teachers to make sure that the education plans are developed collaboratively. At the high school, we work with the gifted facilitators and myself with the AP, IB, and the College Credit Plus folks. And we always submit data every year, and we, whenever they want to audit us, they're able to do so. So, do you have any questions?
Any questions? I want to ask you what you, this ramping up of gifted educators, their professional development, to my untrained ear, that sounds like a really good thing. How do you feel about that?
I think ultimately it's a great thing because the more teachers that have, direct instruction and professional development, really rich quality professional development, and learn about the needs of our gifted students, the better able they're going to be to serve them. It presents, I'll be quite honest, a bit of a challenge because in the past, when they've introduced new operating standards, they give you a year to prepare. Okay, this was approved in March, and it's effective July 1. So that's been, I think, everyone across the state has been making adjustments to make sure that they're able to meet the requirement. Despite that, as I said, ultimately, it's going to be fantastic for our kids. And the teachers, by and large, are excited about it. We are able to use any gifted professional development we've provided in the last 24 months, so that does help for this first year. But moving into the second year, and some teachers are doing 2 workshops this summer and getting 60 hours. So,
Great.
All in all, it's been a good. It's been good in that we've surveyed the teachers to find out the best professional development model for them, what they're interested, when they want it, how they want it, and we had a large number of teachers that responded to that. And it impacts at elementary to middle 147 teachers. So it's a lot.
It's a lot. Thank you.
So, Rick, I was going to say one thing since you brought it up. I was really impressed that so many teachers were willing to go to training over the summer and not take classroom time. I mean, that was a large number. I think you said 47?
47, yeah.
Yeah, so grateful for that.
Well, and that was funded through some gifted professional development money that we had, development money. Some of our buildings had just a little bit, and it was very affordable. For 30 hours, it was right at $300. So considering the amount of hours that you need and you get for that amount of money, I thought it was pretty good. So principals chipped in, gifted chipped in, and we also had some curriculum money that we were able to use.
Well, thank you. Very appreciative.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Agenda item 10.05, first reading revised policy 6325, procurement, federal grants and funds.
That's mine.
Well, I assumed.
Mr. President, members of the board, the only change really this involves is, remember when we went from the threshold of 25,000 to 50,000 for bids? That's what this is affected. We did check one part on here when we use sealed bids to use an adequate number of qualified suppliers. But the main part of this was a change from 25 to 50,000. That's all the changes.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that? Thank you, sir. 10.06, first reading revised policy 6423, use of credit cards. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, members of the board, the only change on this policy, the auditors, state auditors, has said that since this is a new policy, we had to put a provision here that says that no cash withdrawals are allowed from our credit card. So, which we don't do that anyway, but we added it to the policy.
Thank you. I'm not going to say anything.
That's good.
You like that, don't you? Thank you very much. Agenda item 10.07, first reading revised policy 6700, Fair Labor Standards Act.
That's mine as well, Mr. President, members of the board. We revised this one. This was a fairly new policy. We had some language that came out earlier last year talking about if employees had to work a certain amount of time, if they're considered salary, there was rules and regulations. We had to modify it this time basically to agree to pay at least minimum wage to Fair Labor Standards Acts of the Ohio law. It talks about non-exempt employees or hourly employees or salaried employees who do not qualify for professional or exemption under Fair Labor Standards. The other big part of this, toward the end of this policy, it says we have to distribute this policy to any new staff member and to all employees on an annual basis. So that's just another requirement of this policy as well. There's a couple other provisions, but it's all federal language.
Okay, thank you. Questions on that? Okay, thank you, Bart. Agenda item 11.01, the 2017-18 student handbooks. Do we need a motion and a second for this?
Yes.
I think we do. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, President Velardo, members of the board. I'm presenting revisions for the 17-18 elementary, middle, and high school student handbooks for your consideration. Our district legal counsel has reviewed the handbooks. The handbooks comply with current law and are consistent with board policy. In our principal's welcome letter, the availability for language interpretation for our parents has been added. Also added was language for students to qualify for exemption from a senior final exam. We have added policy 5630.01, positive behavior, the revisions that you made just moments ago to that second reading, to the handbook to comply with the primary reason why it was on your board docket. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions, comments? Hearing none, thank you very much. Please call the roll.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, once again, thank you. 11.02, resolution authorizing continued membership in the Ohio High School Athletic Association for 2017-18 school year. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
And this is pretty standard. Dr. Kellogg, would you like to?
It's pretty standard.
It's pretty
the annual
standard.
renewal.
Thank you.
It's like your newspaper. Every year you just renew it.
You just renew it. Okay. Mr. Griffith, please call the roll.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. Moving on, agenda item 11.03, overnight or out-of-state field trips. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. I am going to say one thing about this. And it just, we would normally, at this point, say, well, how come we can't go on these trips? Or we'd make some kind of comment like that. Recently, our family at Thomas Worthington High School had one of these trips and lost a 16-year-old. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little, so we're not going to make a comment like that. We're just going to say, one, that these are tremendous responsibilities that our leadership undertakes, and we believe, they undertake them with a great deal of responsibility, and we're just so grateful for that. And tremendous opportunities for these young people. We have a Washington, D.C. trip and some wrestling camps and basketball, girls and boys, and just, so just from me, I would like to say, I think from us, really, that we'd like to offer to our Thomas Worthington High School family our deepest thoughts and prayers at this time. And Dr. Kellogg, if that can be conveyed in any way other than just what we're saying here, I would appreciate, and just even if that's a phone call to their superintendent, that we, in acknowledging these trips and excited about these trips, also are very mindful of these are our precious children going on these trips, and we're excited for them. Sorry, I wanted to offer that word. We did a motion and a second already, right? Yes, please. Bart, would you call the roll?
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes. Agenda item 11.04, a resolution to terminate Terry Witherspoon. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Griffith, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, thank you. Moving on, agenda item 12.01, public comments. We have one person signed up, Rhonda Gilpin. As she comes forward, a reminder, you will have 5 minutes to address the board and public comment section. Please remember to, Mr. Griffith will be taking the time, you know Mr. Griffith, and share with us, please.
No problem. I won't take my full 5 minutes. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Mr. Griffith. I'm here representing the teachers of the Westerville City Schools. I was directed by the WA executive members to share some concerns regarding courses and FTE. We have a number of high school students are being denied opportunities because of the lack of FTE, or teachers to teach the courses. For example, in the sciences, we have 15 students at Central and 22 at South who are unable to take geology next year. At South, 26 students are unable to take zoology and another 30 who are unable to take PBS next year. At Central, I am told there are 4 science classes that could be filled, but no teacher has been hired to teach them. So that would equate to around 112 students missing an opportunity in science. Plus, with the classes already maxed out, a student who finds the need to maybe drop an honors chemistry class down to a regular chem class, they won't be able to because the class is already maxed out. And that would be the same in situation for physics and biology as well. In world languages, we have 85 students at Central, 32 at South, and another 50 at North who are unable to take American Sign Language next year. We also have 18 students at Central, 14 at South, and 20 at North who are unable to take French next year. I could go on, so I will. For example, 57 students wanting to take sociology at Central next year, plus 74 at Central wanting to take psychology, 29 at South, and another 90 students at North all wanting to take psychology but are unable to do so. I know many of the examples I gave are electives or the ability to allow some of our students to double up on science courses, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they are denied opportunities for our students. Are there other courses like chemistry, engineering, et cetera, that might be available? Yes. But not all of our students are going to be college-bound. Some will go to technical schools or directly into the workplace, and we need to be sure we have opportunities or courses to meet the needs for all of our students. As a district, we have increased FTE in the past few years, but as we expand our Pathways programs and other innovative courses, we need to be able to sustain those courses by not pulling FTE from other courses that our students have an interest in. I have primarily focused on high school, but that does not take away from the need to continue adding programs and opportunities for our middle school students. Middle school was hard hit and needs to also be a priority when looking at adding programs and the teachers to teach them. Sitting in study halls, we all know, is not the best way for a middle schooler to use his or her mind. As we add guidance curriculum and library media curriculum, the need to add teachers will increase even more. WA knows this isn't an easy fix, but we felt it was important to bring to the board's attention, and I've only given you a few of the examples that were sent to me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rhonda, coming forward and sharing. Agenda item 13.01, board comments. Who has a couple words to share?
I do. A couple of things. Back to Ron Balcony. I didn't get a chance to say it when Ron was here. I'll send him a message and let him know. But I think it's really important to say something beyond what we said in the resolution. And Rick, you alluded to it when you talked about the fine man that he is. And I think it's just really important to talk about what Ron gave all those young men that he worked with, all of those families, and all of that building. Ron epitomizes the warrior way at Westerville North, and he actually epitomizes the best of what it means to be Westerville City Schools. And I'm delighted that we proceeded with naming the Strength Room, and it's a perfect name, Ron Balcone Strength, because that's what he brought, that's what he gave. I'm not talking physical, I'm talking about emotional and spiritual strength across this community. So I'm delighted that we're able to do that for Ron. Second thing is, Tracy, you were talking about how great it is the teachers who are going for that summer training. And I think it's important to point out we have hundreds of teachers who've chosen to engage in training this summer, whether it's the gifted training, which, by the way, I'm hearing is absolutely fantastic, or whether it's the Bridges training, which was exciting to go see, whether it was the Ed Tech camp, whether it's any of the other opportunities that we've opened up to teachers to take advantage of. We have literally hundreds who are doing that. It's exciting to see that and to talk to those who take part. The other thing is related to what Rhonda Gilpin was talking about. And Rhonda, you bring up some extraordinarily important points, one of which, I don't have them in any particular order, but one of which is the urgency of addressing middle school. And we do need to really continue to focus on middle school, to really look deeply at what we need to do there. You're right, it was hit hard. We have made changes. We have done some stuff. We need to do more. We really do need to continue to focus on middle school. And John, I know you've heard me say that several times to you in the past, and I know that you take it seriously as well. You also mentioned the FTE increases. There have been quite a number of increases in our FTE. What we have not, and I'm speaking purely for myself, what we have not been able to do thus far is to keep up with the pace of change as we focused on our 21st century students. We haven't yet been able to keep up with the pace of change required for all of the opportunities that we're bringing into play. We're running fast, we're bringing people on, but there is room for us to really continue to focus on that. And as I think about that, John, you typically bring to us a report on personnel, and we talk about what that looks like. I would really like to see the impact of the FTE on our college-bound as well as our non-college-bound students. Where are we seeing these significant stressors? Rhonda brought several forward. Where are we seeing a number of stressors as regards our course offerings and our ability to meet student needs? It's a piece that we all care about, and it's, as you know, Rhonda, a tricky one to meet. But as we continue to press forward in that regard, and as we look at our staffing plan and so forth, it would be very helpful to me to understand more of where those pain points and pleasure points are in what we have done with our FTE.
Thank you, Rhonda, for coming and speaking to us. I guess my comment would be, as we add things, did we take, I know we didn't take away FTE, but did we redistribute that? Is that what has happened?
There's lots of different approaches along the way. Enrollment patterns at the secondary level, particularly high school, what you have to understand is as high schoolers choose particularly elective courses, enrollment patterns then drive perceived FTE needs. And so you may have, I'll sort out a course, I'll say sociology, which may be a very popular course at one instance in time and have a high enrollment. Factors may change student interest in that particular course and may change the enrollment pattern. And then you may find yourself having hired for an enrollment pattern that no longer exists and having FTE that isn't aligned to student requests. So you get those components. We have grown as we examine enrollment patterns. Speaking to what Dr. Nestor Baker said, I can tell you right now that preliminary numbers show a 1,000 seat increase in AP enrollment going into next year. We did add 3 FTE at science at the high schools, and gave those to the schools to determine how to slice that up and meet the demand. We added FTE in world languages the year before, and the schools made choices as to how they wanted to allocate that FTE. We made FTE increases in music the year before, and they allocated those. We try and work with the building administrators to make a determination of, okay, generally what are we trying to do and where we want to put that staff. So you'll have changes in enrollment patterns. You'll have, the other component is looking at courses in, this will sound harsh, I don't mean it to sound, but course relevance and importance to our master schedules and what we're trying to do with students, and knowing that if we have too broad an offering of courses, it makes it difficult to staff. So when you get into the sciences, which is probably a best example, as we've grown our health pathways, grown AP coursework, and then created more interest, you'll see enrollment patterns change, and so year to year. So we do monitor it. The other component is how many sections of courses do the buildings choose to keep in their master schedule that have low enrollment. So you make a choice for, we're going to keep course A and let a section of course B go, and that makes changes. So we continue to study it. We continue to look at it. We know it's a pressure point. Some of it is a function of how past policy practices that were not written policies, but ways we were managing staff have changed. Rhonda referenced students taking more than the required number of science classes. So if you have 3 sciences required for graduation, but you're hungry for sciences and want to take 5, in the past we may have squashed that and not allowed for that, and we have removed that. We want to see those demands so that we can examine the demands and then figure out long-term how to fulfill those. So year to year, we may have places where we haven't staffed FTE to the enrollment request, but we want to see what the patterns are to see how they sustain, so that we're not investing in FTE that later on aren't meeting those student demands, as well as just making sure we're taking care of the core that has to be taken care of along the way. So.
Sure, and I appreciate all that. Just a friendly reminder, I know we all remember our foreign language teachers coming and speaking to us, and we've heard from them a couple of times. I would say my only other, just for the record, I've heard from parents that are a little bit worried about some of the addition of the AP and College Credit Plus, because they felt, I'm not sure that this is true, that it took away some of the standard level classes. So,
any choices to not staff a course is a building administration choice. We haven't closed out courses at the district level and said these will not be offered. What happens is a building is building their master schedule and says, I have X number of science teachers on my staff. I have course enrollment numbers that determine this many sections. So simple math. If you have 10 science teachers, each teaching 5 classes, you can have 50 sections of science. What 50 sections of science you're going to teach is going to be dependent upon the enrollment patterns to those courses. And so you may have a section of something left off that you didn't want to staff. An example at Westerville Central I know of is that my understanding is they had actually enough enrollment for one more AP Stats course, but opted not to offer the AP Stats section, limit the AP Stats sections in order to maintain some class sizes and other math that they want to have. So the trade-offs are not a function of district office saying we're not going to offer these courses or staff these courses. It's a function of we negotiate with them, what are your staffing needs? We make those plans based on how we've discussed overall dollars for staffing, and then we work with those. And we had a long conversation with our high school teams regarding additional FTE for science that the board approved when we added 3 more science, and part of that discussion was with the building administrative teams, all right, if we have 3 FTE to play with and growth, where do you want to put it? Are there other places? We talked about social studies elective, we talked about American Sign Language, we talked about all those pieces. And at the end of the day, the response from the building administration to us was, we like these to be 3 full FTE for science. We think that's where our biggest need is going into this next year. So we continue to carry that over. As you know, we have the 5-year long-range plan that we continue to build on. We will, between now and November of next year, we will revisit that plan with some of these components in mind, and we want to bring that to the board earlier in the year. So currently, our staffing allocation is a number that we've decided upon that's embedded in our 5-year forecast. Any adjustments to that number provide a change to what the 5-year forecast looks like, or a change in how we're allocating dollars across the district to keep the 5-year forecast. So staffing has traditionally been very close to the bone, very end of the year kind of a component. We'd like to get more out in front of it so that these questions can be asked, whether or not we're looking at growth or maintenance, what are the enrollment patterns, so that the board can make better informed decisions earlier around total allocation of dollars towards FTE, around all staffing earlier, so that we can be A, ahead of the curve in terms of hiring, and B, projecting what our needs might be and what past pains have we seen that need to be addressed. So our long-range plan is to be more on top of total staffing earlier in the year so we can make those decisions more timely.
I guess my comments are just for us to be mindful, because I feel like the state is constantly pushing us to move ahead, AP, higher classes. We do that because we want to push kids, and I think it is good for kids, majority of the time, but I think we cannot forget about all the kids. That's just my thoughts. So.
Rhonda, I would like to thank you for coming forward today and bringing the conversation to us. I'd also like to thank WEA leadership for facilitating that. So much appreciated, and my thanks back to the leadership team. That being said, I think that there's a piece here that we need to take into account, which is this important differentiation between core studies and electives. That being said, I'm not saying I'm in favor of a course of study in this district that is completely and totally and lock-aligned to core studies. The challenge is that when I hear numbers of students in all 3 high schools approaching the 40, 50, 60, 70 level in each high school for sections, for classes that are electives, then that tells me that we've got a communication gap with our families. Right? Our families need to understand that electives are additive, right? If we want those as a district, all right, then it is really incumbent upon our families of those students to be clear in their support of the district's resources and need to make that happen, right? This is just the reality, right? If we want all of that, then that comes with a price tag. And I'm a firm believer that teachers want to teach, right? And teachers want to be in the classroom with these students, and they want to provide these opportunities. We have an obligation to operate with the resources that are provided to us by our community. If more is wanted, then I'm going to be very frank about it. More has to be given. And it's just the truth, right? We are not going to milk additional teaching staff out of the current resource base into any other classes just magically, right? And this is really, really critical for our community to understand. Everybody's super excited about the trajectory the district is going. Chief among them, members of this board, we're very, very happy and very, very excited. But we've got to be communicating in a way that people understand that once we get out of, once we get out of our guardrails and get out of our lanes relative to fiscal accountability and resources, available resources as we have them, capital expenditures, all of these components, they come with a price tag. And I think that that's incumbent upon us to be doing a better job in communicating that and more broadly through the community.
Great conversation, Rhonda. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and bringing it back to us. I'd echo a lot of what has been said up front. Moving on to agenda item 14.01, the board will meet in regular session June 26, 6 p.m., Monday, July 10, 7 a.m. in the early learning. 7?
That's the annual last-minute HR meeting that we, Bart's bringing donuts, he promised.
Somebody, 7 a.m. Would you like to make a motion and change that? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nancy and I prefer 9.
I would like to add an official word that Bart is bringing donuts. I'd like that in the motion.
He will charge us.
District credit card.
The budget notwithstanding, Nancy. Okay, I don't know if I finished with that. At the Early Learning Center here. And 15:01, may I have a motion and a second for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes, we are adjourned.
Go Cavs.
8 o'clock?